Hey everyone, have you ever put over 1,000 hours in the Fallout 4, and after putting in nearly another 1,000 hours, you begin to wonder, man, I wonder what the background of the nuclear bomb is. Well, if you've fulfilled those weirdly specific guidelines, don't worry, I have you covered. So, our story begins where all good stories start, World War II. The Germans had been attempting to make a nuclear bomb since 1939, and it wasn't going so hot. Whether that was due to the Allies sabotaging their attempts, or the fact that the war wasn't going too well for the Germans in general, who's to say? Though the Germans may have been struggling to make the atomic bomb, the Americans were beginning their own attempts during the famous Manhattan Project, and it went a lot better for them. During this secretive project, the US government enlisted help of scientists, schools, and the military to make the ultimate weapon. And after years of hard work, in New Mexico on July 18th, 1945, the Trinity test took place, marking the first successful detonation of a nuclear bomb in history. After developing the first nuclear weapon in 1945, the Americans used this new development to... how do I say this academically? Completely level two Japanese cities, helping end World War II. Since then, the United States continued to develop its nuclear arsenal and only had a couple of brushes with complete nuclear Armageddon. In 1952, the US was also the first country to successfully develop a hydrogen bomb, resulting in the largest nuclear weapon detonated by the United States, that being the Castle Bravo test, which had a yield of 15,000 kilotons. The United States is also the only nuclear-armed country to share its nukes with other countries. Currently, the American military has nukes stationed in Turkey, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. So, it's pretty entertaining. Seeing the power that could be obtained by possessing a nuclear arsenal, the Soviet Union began kinda copying the Americans' homework to make their own nukes. The Soviet Union had a lot easier time developing nuclear weapons than the Americans, due to two major factors. One, they took a lot of research from the Germans after the conclusion of World War II, and two, they had a lot of spies embedded within the Manhattan Project. After a couple of years of work, the Soviet Union detonated their first atomic bomb on August 29th, 1949 in the Kazakh SSR, also known as modern-day Kazakhstan. Even though the Soviets were the second country to develop nuclear weapons, they still kinda cheated to get there. But don't worry, they certainly compensated for that by detonating the most powerful nuclear weapon in history, also known as the Tsar Bomba. With a yield of 50 megatons, the Tsar Bomba is comparable to about 3 Castle Bravos. For reference, if we hop on the nuke map and drop it in the Quad Cities, the blast radius of the bomb is massive, stretching from Maquoketa, Iowa to Little York, Illinois. And if we drop the originally planned 100 megaton version that was scaled down because the Soviets were scared of it, it has a absolutely ridiculous blast radius reaching from Burlington, Iowa to just a handful of miles south of Galena, Illinois. Anyway, with that scary fact out of the way, let's talk about the British. With help from the Americans, the British were able to become the third nuclear power upon the detonation of their first nuclear weapon on October 3rd, 1952 in the Montebello Islands in Western Australia. Now, the question tends to come up when discussing the British nuclear program of why did they detonate a nuke in Australia? Well, personally, I can think of a couple of reasons, but the real reason was that Australia was a colony, and colonies don't typically get a say when it comes to testing new military technology. The largest nuke ever tested by the British was the Grapple Y, tested on April 28, 1958 in the Christmas Islands in, where else but Australia. Now, as we all know, both the Russian and American stockpiles are absolutely massive. But, with the British, it is a much more manageable number. Their arsenal peaked at about 500 warheads in the 1970s, and currently it sits at about 200 warheads in 2023. France. The birthplace of many interesting things. French people, croissants, the guillotine, and nuclear research. Much of the groundwork of the nuclear bomb can be traced back to France, with people like Marie Curie being some of the early figures in nuclear research. Anyway, France detonated their first bomb on February 13th, 1960 in Algeria. Again, in the same situation as Australia, Algeria was a colony. The largest French nuke ever tested was detonated on August 24th, 1968 in French Polynesia because Algeria had kicked the French out in that 8-year gap. The French arsenal peaked at around 500 warheads in the 90s and is currently around 300 warheads in 2023. And here we are with China, the fifth and final country to legally possess nuclear weapons according to the United Nations. Getting a lot of help from the Soviets, China detonated its first nuclear weapon on October 16, 1964 in its Zhejiang province. The largest Chinese nuke ever tested was in 1992, and it was a classified underground test, so we don't know a whole lot about it, though it was estimated to have a yield of somewhere between 600 and 1,000 kilotons. It is unknown what the peak Chinese arsenal was, however, it is speculated that it is currently around 350 warheads as of 2023. Alright, get ready for me to overuse the term allegedly and speculate a lot when referring to Israel's nuclear stockpile because they have never officially declared that they have nuclear weapons, even though everyone kind of knows they do. Allegedly, the Israelis acquired nuclear weapons with the help of the French and British sometime in the early 1960s. It is unknown when Israel detonated their first nuke, however some have speculated that it could have been sometime in the late 1960s into the 1970s. Although no official locations of tests have been disclosed, it is speculated that the Vela incident, in which a satellite picked up a double flash of light in 1979, was the result of a joint Israeli-South African nuclear test in the southern Indian Ocean. Now, obviously, no definitive numbers are known about their nuclear stockpile, however, it is speculated that Israel possesses something in the ballpark of 90 warheads. Failing to sign both the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, India's nuclear arsenal is a tad controversial. Anyway, India began developing an arsenal due to its rivalry with neighboring China, and due to the belief that Pakistan had begun doing the same. So on May 14th, 1974, in the state of Rajasthan, India detonated their first nuclear weapon, codenamed Smiling Buddha. Which, can I say, that's the best name out of all of them. Yo, dude, you want to go see the Smiling Buddha? Yeah, man, that sounds sick. Alright, man, just look that way. Oh, that way? So, what'd you think? My eyes will never see something so substantial again. Anyway, the Indian arsenal is currently at its peak of around 160 warheads. And our next nuclear power is South Africa, which is an interesting case because South Africa is the only country to have developed their own nuclear weapons and then proceeded to voluntarily get rid of them. Getting help from Israel, South Africa would test their first nuclear weapons sometime in the late 70s to the early 1980s. Now, at this time, South Africa was ruled by an apartheid regime, and upon the collapse of this regime in the late 80s, the government decommissioned their nuclear arsenal. They claimed at the time that this was to help with the transfer of power, however, it's pretty widely known now that the real reason they did this was. It is known that South Africa's nuclear stockpile never got any higher than 6 warheads, and currently it is sitting at 0. Similar to India, Pakistan also failed to sign both the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Pakistan would develop their nuclear arsenal in response to India in the 1990s, and on May 28, 1998, Pakistan would welcome in the new millennium in style by detonating their first nuclear bomb in the Balochistan province. Currently, Pakistan's arsenal is at its peak of around 160 warheads, coincidentally close to the same number as India. And here we are at the newest, most active, and most controversial nuclear power, North Korea. Using old Soviet and Chinese research combined with help from Pakistan, North Korea successfully detonated their first nuclear weapon on October 9, 2006. and immediately began threatening everybody else with them. And if you've been around since the mid-2010s, you know the story from there. It is speculated that North Korea's arsenal is currently at its peak of about 20 warheads. And as of mid-2023, that completes the Nuclear Weapons Appreciation Group, including 8 members, 1 former member, and 1 secret member who everyone kind of knows is part of the crew. Now, there are talks of Iran being able to get some bombs here within the next couple of years. However, I have no clue if that's accurate or not, because they've been saying that for years now. Anyway, time to make a PSA.
I, Michael, do not support or condone nuclear warfare. All research done for this video was purely for the endeavor of creating semi-educational content and entertaining content.
Let's hope that gets me off the FBI watch list.